Cole had grease under his fingernails for 32 years. He knew the smell of burning coolant better than he knew the smell of fresh air. He could tell you what was wrong with an engine just by listening to it hum, and he had saved more ships from exploding than he could count. But now, at 57 years old, he was done. His back hurt when he bent over engine cores. His eyes strained when he read diagnostic screens. His hands, once steady as stone, had started to shake after long shifts. The universe was telling him something, and for once decided to listen. The message came on a Tuesday. His aunt had passed away, and she had left him everything she owned. Barely remembered aunt. She had been a quiet woman who sent him birthday cards when he was young and then faded from his life like so many others had. But apparently she had remembered him because her entire estate now belonged to him. That estate consisted of one thing: a bar on a frontier moon called Srest. Had never heard of Srest. He looked it up and found a small settlement on a dusty moon orbiting a gas giant at the edge of explored space. Miners worked the asteroid fields nearby. Traders passed through on their way to distant colonies. It was the kind of place people came to when they wanted to disappear or when they had nowhere else to go. He sold his tools. He packed his few belongings. He booked passage on a cargo ship and spent 3 weeks in a cramped cabin, wondering if he had lost his mind. But something about the idea called to him. A bar. A place where people came to rest, to talk, to forget their troubles for a little while. After 3 decades of fixing machines, maybe it was time to try something different. The bar was called the Rusted Anchor, and it looked exactly like its name suggested. The building sat at the edge of the settlement, a squat structure made of metal panels that had seen better days. Rust crept along the corners. The sign above the door flickered weakly. When stepped inside for the first time, dust rose from the floor in little clouds around his boots. The interior was dark and musty. Tables and chairs sat covered in sheets. The bar itself was a long stretch of synthetic wood, scratched and stained from years of use. Behind it, empty shelves waited for bottles that were no longer there. The whole place smelled like old memories and neglect. Stood in the middle of the room and felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt like he was home. He got to work the next morning. The cooling system was ancient, held together by patches and prayers, but had worked with worse. He spent 3 days taking it apart, cleaning every component, replacing what needed replacing, and putting it back together. When he finished, the unit hummed smoothly for the first time in probably a decade. The satisfaction he felt was familiar and welcome. The plumbing came next, then the electrical system, then the structural repairs. Fell into a rhythm he knew well. Wake up, work until his body demanded rest, sleep, repeat. He ordered supplies from the settlement's general store. He cleaned every surface until the dust was gone. He arranged the tables and chairs in a way that felt welcoming rather than cluttered. The hardest part was learning to be a bartender. Had spent his life with machines, not people. Machines made sense. They followed rules. If something was broken, you could find the problem and fix it. People were different. People were complicated and unpredictable and full of emotions that did not follow any logic could understand. He practiced making drinks using instruction guides he downloaded from the settlement's network. He learned the difference between a proper pour and a sloppy one. He discovered that the temperature of a glass mattered, that the order you added ingredients could change everything, that presentation was almost as important as taste. It was like learning a new kind of engineering, one where the components were liquids and the output was satisfaction. 3 weeks after arriving on Srest, opened the Rusted Anchor for business. He had cleaned the sign and replaced its flickering light with a steady glow. He had stocked the shelves with bottles of various colors and origins. He had put on a clean shirt and combed his gray hair and told himself that this was the start of something new. The first night, nobody came. Sat behind the bar, polishing glasses that did not need polishing, listening to the wind howl against the walls. Rest was not a busy place. The miners worked long shifts and often stayed in their housing units. The traders who passed through usually wanted to resupply and leave as quickly as possible. Why would any of them come to a bar run by a stranger? The second night was the same. So was the third. Began to wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. Maybe he should have stayed on the freighter lines. Maybe he should have found work at a shipyard somewhere. At least then he would have been doing something useful instead of sitting alone in an empty bar, waiting for customers who never arrived. On the fourth night, the wind picked up. A storm was rolling in from across the moon's barren surface, bringing dust and static electricity that made skin prickle. He considered closing early, since there was no point staying open when nobody was coming anyway. He was reaching for the light controls when the door opened. The figure that entered had to duck to fit through the doorway, and even then the curved horns on his head scraped against the frame. He was massive, easily 8 feet tall, with broad shoulders and a powerful frame covered in scales. Those scales were the color of a midnight sky, deep and dark with hints of purple that caught the light and threw it back in strange patterns. His face was elongated, almost like a great lizard, with a jaw full of teeth that could probably crush metal. His eyes burned with golden fire, ancient and deep, and filled with a weariness that recognized immediately. Had seen many alien species in his years of travel. He had worked alongside beings with tentacles, beings with 4 arms, beings made of living crystal, but he had never seen anything like this. He searched his memory, trying to place what species this could be, and when the answer came to him, he felt his heart skip a beat. One of the dragon kings who ruled an empire spanning 3 galaxies, beings of immense power and longer than most species could comprehend. Had heard stories about them, legends really, but he had never expected to see one in person. Certainly not in a rundown bar on a frontier moon at the edge of nowhere. He looked around the empty room. His golden eyes moved from table to table, from the dusty corners to the polished bar. Then those eyes settled on, and for a moment neither of them moved. Set down the glass he had been holding. He took a breath. He reminded himself that this was his bar, and everyone who walked through that door deserved the same treatment. He nodded at the massive being, and said the only thing that made sense. "Welcome to the Rusted Anchor. What can I get you?" He stood in the doorway for a long moment, as if he had not expected anyone to speak to him so casually. His golden eyes studied with an intensity that made the old mechanic feel like he was being taken apart and examined piece by piece. Had faced down malfunctioning reactors and hull breaches in the void of space. He held his ground. Finally, the massive being moved. Each step he took made the floor creak beneath his weight. His tail, long and thick and covered in the same midnight scales as the rest of him, swept behind him like a living thing with its own mind. He approached the bar slowly, his eyes never leaving his face, and when he reached the row of stools, he paused. The stools were designed for humans and species of similar size. He looked at them the way might look at furniture made for children. But after a moment of consideration, he lowered himself onto one of them. The metal groaned in protest. The seat compressed under his weight, but somehow, impossibly, it held. Reached for a glass. First time here. The lips pulled back slightly, revealing more of those knife-like teeth. It took a moment to realize it was meant to be a smile. First time anywhere like this in a very long time. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding against each other in a riverbed. There was something musical about it too, a resonance that seemed to vibrate in his chest. It was the kind of voice that commanded attention without trying, the voice of someone used to being obeyed. Set the glass on the bar. What brings you to rest, mining, trading, just passing through? There was quiet for a moment. His clawed hands rested on the bar, each finger ending in a curved talon that could probably tear through steel. "Escaping," he said finally. "I am escaping." Did not ask from what. He had learned long ago that some questions were not meant to be asked until the person was ready to answer them. Instead, he gestured at the bottles lined up behind him. What's your poison? I've got Terran whiskey brandy, something from the system that I'm told will put hair on your chest, or take it off, depending on your biology. That almost smile appeared again. Surprise me. Considered the options. He reached for a bottle of aged whiskey from Earth, one of the few luxuries he had allowed himself when stocking the bar. He poured a generous measure into the glass and slid it across to his customer. The picked it up, and the glass looked tiny in his massive hand, like a thimble held by a giant. He brought it to his nose first, inhaling deeply. His eyes closed for a moment and something in his expression softened. Then he drank, a single smooth motion that emptied the glass completely. Another, he said, and his voice was slightly less rough than before. Poured, you got a name, friend. The looked at him. There was something strange in his golden eyes, something that might have been surprise or confusion or both. You truly do not know who I am. Shrugged, I know your people run a pretty big empire out there in the galaxy. Beyond that, I'm afraid I don't keep up with politics much. Spent most of my life in engine rooms. The silence that followed was heavy. The stared at as if he were seeing something remarkable, something unexpected. Then slowly he began to laugh. It was a low sound, rumbling up from deep in his chest, and it shook the bottles on the shelves behind. Do you know how long it has been since someone spoke to me without fear or calculation? The shook his head, still laughing softly. Do you know how long it has been since someone asked my name instead of already knowing it and using it to try and gain favor? Waited. The laughter faded, replaced by something quieter and sadder. My name is, I am the High King of the Empire, ruler of 3 galaxies, commander of the greatest military force in known space. He looked down at his empty glass. And I am very, very tired. Process this information the way he would process a diagnostic report, calmly, methodically, without letting the enormity of it throw him off balance. He had a king in his bar, the ruler of an empire that spanned more territory than humanity had even explored, and that king had come to the rusted anchor because he was tired. Poured another drink, rough day. Laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it. Rough millennium. He drank the whiskey more slowly this time, savoring it. Watched him, seeing not a powerful ruler but a creature carrying a weight that was slowly crushing him. He had seen that look before, in the faces of engineers who had worked too many shifts without rest, in the eyes of captains who had made impossible choices and had to live with the consequences. You want to talk about it? Asked. Looked at him. Why would you care? I am nothing to you, a stranger who walked into your establishment. That's what bars are for, said. People come in, they drink, they talk. Sometimes the talking helps more than the drinking. And sometimes a stranger is exactly who you need to talk to, because a stranger doesn't expect anything from you. There was silent for a long time. The wind howled outside and dust scratched against the windows like tiny claws trying to get in. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. My empire is dying, said finally. The words came out heavy as if each one cost him something to speak. A plague swept through our 14 years ago. It targeted our young, our hatchlings. We lost an entire generation. The ones who survived are too few to replace those we lost. Said nothing, he just listened. Wars have broken out over resources. Allies who swore eternal friendship have turned against us, seeing weakness where once they saw strength. My own advisors plot against each other, each one convinced that their plan is the only one that can save us. Claws tightened around his glass, and for a moment thought it might shatter. And through all of this I am expected to be strong, to project power, to never show doubt or fear or exhaustion, to be the unshakable foundation upon which my people rest. He set the glass down gently, with exquisite control. I have not slept in 4 years. My species requires little rest, but even we have limits. I cannot remember the last meal I ate that was not taken between crisis meetings. I cannot remember the last time I spoke to someone who wanted nothing from me. Refilled the glass, "So you came here." "I came to the edge of known space," said, "where no one would recognize me, where I could be anonymous for one night, where I could simply sit and drink and pretend that the weight of 3 galaxies is not resting on my shoulders." He picked up the glass but did not drink. He just stared at the amber liquid, watching the way the light moved through it. "And then I walked into an empty bar," he continued, "and the human behind the counter greeted me like I was any other customer. Do you have any idea how precious that is? How long I have wanted someone to look at me and see a person instead of a symbol?" Met his eyes. "I see you," he said simply. "And from where I'm standing, you look like someone who needs another drink and maybe a few hours of not having to be in charge of anything." Stared at him. And then, for the first time, the almost smile on his face became something real, something warm. "I believe I chose well tonight," the Dragon King said. "I believe this was exactly where I needed to be." The storm outside grew stronger as the night went on. Wind screamed across the barren surface of rest, carrying dust and debris that rattled against the walls of the rusted anchor like 1,000 tiny fists demanding entry. But inside the bar, there was only the soft glow of lights, the warmth of good whiskey, and the sound of 2 very different beings finding common ground. Learned more about the Empire in those hours than he had ever known. Spoke of his people's history, of the great cities they had built on worlds circling ancient stars, of the art and music and philosophy that had flourished for tens of thousands of years. He spoke of the wars they had fought and won, the peace they had maintained, the delicate balance of power that had kept 3 galaxies in relative harmony for. And he spoke of watching it all begin to crumble. "The plague was engineered," said, his voice dropping to something barely above a whisper. "We discovered that too late. One of our former allies, a species called the, created it as revenge for a slight they believed we had committed against them centuries ago. By the time we understood what had happened, 3/4 of our hatchlings were dead." Poured himself a drink for the first time that night. He felt like he needed it. "What happened to the—" "We destroyed them," said it simply, without pride or satisfaction. "Every world, every station, every ship. There are no left in the universe. It took us 4 years to complete their extinction." He looked at his claws, turning them slowly in the light. "And it changed nothing. Our children were still dead. Our future was still stolen. All we had accomplished was ensuring that they would never threaten anyone again. Cold comfort when you are burying your young." Thought about that. He had no children of his own. He had never stayed in one place long enough to build that kind of life. But he understood loss. He understood the hollow feeling that came from having something taken from you that could never be replaced. "You did what you had to do," said. "You protected your people from a threat. That's what leaders are supposed to do." Looked at him with those ancient golden eyes. "Is that what you believe?" "I believe that someone who created a plague to kill children deserved whatever they got," said. "I'm not a complicated man. I fix things that are broken. Sometimes fixing something means removing the part that's causing the problem." The Dragon King was quiet for a long moment. Then he let out a breath that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside him. "You speak simply, but there is wisdom in your words. My advisors wrap everything in layers of meaning and political calculation. They speak in circles, always careful to never commit to any position that might be used against them later. It is exhausting." Shrugged. "That's politics, I guess. Never had much use for it myself." "And yet here you are," said, "offering counsel to a king." "I'm offering drinks to a customer," corrected. "The counsel is free." That earned another real smile from. Was starting to recognize the difference between the almost smile, which seemed to be a reflex, and the genuine expression, which transformed the Dragon King's fearsome face into something almost warm. "Tell me about yourself," said. "I have spoken of nothing but my troubles since I arrived. It is rude of me." Considered the question. His life had never seemed particularly interesting to him. He had worked, he had traveled, he had fixed things. That was about the sum of it. "Not much to tell," he said. Born on Earth, one of the old cities. My father was a mechanic, his father was a mechanic, and so on back for generations. I started working on engines when I was 12, joined a freighter crew when I was 18, spent the next 30-odd years moving from ship to ship, port to port, seen a lot of the galaxy, fixed a lot of broken things. And now you are here, said, running a bar on a forgotten moon. Now I'm here, agreed. My aunt left me this place when she died. I figured it was time for a change. My hands shake now, and my eyes aren't what they used to be. Not safe to be working on ships when you can't trust your own body. Nodded slowly. Age comes for all of us eventually. Even my kind, as long-lived as we are, must face the dimming of our fire. He paused, studying with fresh interest. But you do not seem diminished to me. You seem like someone who has simply chosen a different path. Had never thought of it that way. He had seen his retirement as an ending, a fading away from a life that had defined him. But maybe was right. Maybe it was just a change in direction, not a stop. You know what I learned in all those years of fixing ships, said. Tilted his head, waiting. Every machine has a breaking point. Doesn't matter how well it's built, how expensive the parts are, how careful the maintenance. Push it too hard for too long and something will give. The engine burns out, the hull cracks, the whole thing tears itself apart. Met the Dragon King's eyes. People aren't that different. The silence that followed was heavy. Could see processing his words, turning them over the way he might turn over a piece of evidence or a strategic consideration. You are saying I am pushing myself to my breaking point, said finally. I'm saying you look like a man who's been running at full power with no rest for way too long, said. And I'm saying that if you don't stop and let yourself cool down, you're going to burn out. Doesn't matter how strong you are or how much your people need you. You can't pour from an empty cup. Was very still. His golden eyes had dimmed slightly, the inner fire banking down to something more controlled. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. No one has spoken to me like this in centuries. My advisors tell me to be strong. My generals tell me to project confidence. My priests tell me that the fire of our ancestors burns within me and will never be extinguished. No one tells me that I am allowed to be tired. No one tells me that I am permitted to rest. Well, I'm telling you, said. You're in my bar now, and in my bar, everyone is allowed to be human. Or whatever. Everyone is allowed to be tired. Everyone is allowed to put down their burdens for a little while and just exist. He refilled his glass. So drink your drink, talk if you want to talk, or don't talk. Just sit here and let yourself breathe. The galaxy will still be there tomorrow and your problems will still be waiting for you. But tonight you don't have to carry any of it. Tonight you can just be a guy in a bar having a drink with the bartender. Picked up the glass. He held it for a long moment, staring at the liquid inside as if it contained answers he had been searching for. Then he looked at, and there was something in his eyes that had not been there before. It looked almost like hope. You are a remarkable human, the Dragon King said. Shook his head. I'm a retired mechanic who knows how to listen. Nothing remarkable about that. I disagree, said, but I will not argue the point. He raised his glass. To the rusted anchor, and to its proprietor who offers sanctuary without asking anything in return. Raised his own glass. To tired travelers, may they always find a place to rest. They drank together as the storm raged outside. Two beings from worlds so different they might as well have been separate universes, finding something unexpected in a rundown bar at the edge of nowhere. They found connection, they found understanding, and in that moment neither of them felt quite so alone. The hours passed in a way that had not experienced in a very long time. It was not the slow crawl of boredom or the frantic rush of crisis. It was something gentler, something almost peaceful. Two people sharing stories, exchanging pieces of themselves, building a bridge between their worlds one word at a time. Wanted to know about Earth. He had heard of the human, of course. The Empire kept detailed files on every species they encountered, and humanity had become increasingly significant in galactic affairs over the past few centuries. But files and reports were not the same as hearing someone describe their home with their own voice. Talked about the city where he had grown up, a sprawling mass of steel and glass that never seemed to sleep. He described the smell of rain on hot pavement, the sound of 100 languages mixing together on crowded streets, the way the sun looked when it set behind the towers and painted the sky in shades of orange and red. He talked about his father's workshop, a cluttered space filled with tools and parts and the constant hum of machinery. He talked about learning to take things apart and put them back together, about the satisfaction of making something work that had been broken. Listened to all of it with an intensity that found both flattering and slightly unnerving. The Dragon King asked questions, probing for details, seeking to understand not just the facts but the feelings behind them. What did it feel like to watch the sun set? What did the rain smell like? What emotions came with fixing a broken machine? You ask a lot of questions, observed at one point. I have forgotten how to simply experience things, admitted. Everything I encounter, I analyze. I calculate its strategic value, its political implications, its potential threats and benefits. I have not asked what something felt like since I was young. He paused. I am trying to remember how. Understood that more than he expected to. He had fallen into similar patterns over the years, approaching everything as a problem to be solved rather than an experience to be lived. It was easy to do when your life was defined by fixing broken things. You started seeing everything as something that needed repair. Tell me about your people, said. Not the empire, not the politics, just your people. What are they like? His expression softened in a way had not seen before. We are creatures of fire, he said. It burns within us from birth, a literal flame that warms our blood and gives us strength. When we are young, that fire is wild and uncontrollable. We learn to master it as we grow, to channel it into purpose and passion. When we grow old, the fire dims, and eventually it goes out and we pass into the void. That sounds beautiful, said. It can be. His voice carried a weight of memory. When gathered together, we can feel each other's fire. It creates a warmth that is difficult to describe to those who have not experienced it. In the old days before the plague, our gathering halls would be filled with that warmth. Hundreds of my people, their fires joining together, creating something greater than any individual flame. He went quiet for a moment and could see the pain behind his eyes. Those halls are much colder now, said softly. There are so few of us left, and those who remain burn with grief and anger more than joy. Poured another drink, taking his time with it. Grief and anger aren't bad things on their own. They're just fire that hasn't found a direction yet. The question is what you do with them. What would you suggest? I'm a mechanic, not a philosopher, said. But if I had a bunch of people burning with undirected energy, I'd try to find something for them to build. Something new. Something that honors what was lost while creating something for the future. Considered this. We have been so focused on surviving, on fighting, on maintaining what we have left. I do not think we have considered building anything new in a very long time. Maybe that's part of the problem, said. Hard to feel hopeful when all you're doing is holding on. People need something to look forward to, not just something to hold on to. The Dragon King was quiet for a long time. His golden eyes had taken on a distant look, as if he was seeing something far beyond the walls of the rusted anchor. Let him think, occupying himself with wiping down the bar and straightening bottles that did not need straightening. You know, said eventually, I came here expecting nothing. I came to escape, to hide, to find a few hours of anonymity before returning to my burdens. I did not expect to find anything of value. Looked up and now I find myself thinking differently. Met his eyes. You have given me something tonight, Cole, something I did not even know I was lacking. Just a few drinks and some conversation, said. "Oh," the word carried absolute certainty. "You have reminded me why I became king in the first place. Not for the power, not for the glory, not because I wanted to rule. I became king because I wanted to protect my people. I wanted to keep them safe, to help them thrive, to see them build a future worth living in." Shook his head slowly. I had forgotten that. Somewhere in the endless meetings and the constant crises and the weight of impossible decisions, I forgot why I was doing any of it. What? He reached into a pouch at his belt, one that had not noticed before. From it, a small crystal, no bigger than his thumb. It pulsed with an inner light, a soft golden glow that seemed to breathe like a living thing. "This is a calling stone," said. "It is attuned to my personal frequency. Speak my name into it and I will hear you, no matter where I am in the galaxy, and I will come." Stared at the crystal. "I can't accept that, that's too much." "It is not enough," said firmly. "You have given me something that all the treasures of my empire could not purchase. You have given me perspective. You have reminded me that I am more than my title, more than my responsibilities, more than the weight I carry." He placed the crystal on the bar between them. "If you ever need anything, anything at all, you need only ask. This is not a debt. It is a gift, freely given, to someone who offered kindness to a stranger without expecting anything in return." Looked at the crystal for a long moment. Then he picked it up, feeling its warmth against his palm. It felt almost alive, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. "All right," he said, "but I want you to know something. I didn't do any of this for a reward. I did it because it was the right thing to do. You came into my bar looking like you needed someone to listen, so I listened. That's all." "I know," said. "That is precisely why this gift matters, because you did not ask for it, because you do not feel entitled to it." He stood, and his massive form seemed to fill the entire bar. "You are a good man, Cole. The universe would be better if there were more like you." Felt his face warm. He was not used to compliments, especially not from ancient kings who ruled 3 galaxies. "I'm just a retired mechanic running a bar. Nothing special about that." Smiled, and this time the expression reached all the way to his eyes. "I have lived for 12,000 years. I have met beings of every kind imaginable. Wise beings, powerful beings, beings of great talent and accomplishment." He leaned forward slightly. "Very few of them have impressed me as much as you have tonight." Outside, the storm was beginning to fade. The wind had died down to a whisper, and the first hints of dawn were creeping across the horizon of rest. A new day was coming, bringing with it all the challenges and responsibilities that both of them had temporarily escaped. But for now, in this moment, there was only the bar and the two of them, and the warmth of unexpected friendship. "Same time next month?" asked. Laughed, a genuine sound of pleasure. "If my schedule permits, and if it does not, I will make it permit." He extended one massive clawed hand. "Until next time, Cole." Took the hand, his own disappearing into the dragon's grip. The scales were warm and smooth, nothing like the cold he might have expected. "Until next time, travel safe." The Dragon King released his hand and turned toward the door. He paused at the threshold, looking back one last time. "Thank you," he said simply. And then he was gone, ducking through the doorway and disappearing into the growing light of morning. Stood alone in the rusted anchor, holding a crystal that connected him to one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. He shook his head slowly, wondering how his life had taken such an unexpected turn. Then he smiled and began preparing for another day. Word spread slowly on rest, the way it always does in small communities where everyone knows everyone and news travels through conversation rather than broadcasts. Someone had seen a massive figure entering the rusted anchor on the night of the storm. Someone else had noticed an unfamiliar ship parked outside the settlement, a vessel of unusual design that hummed with technology far beyond anything the miners used. Speculation grew, questions, and eventually people started coming to the bar just to see if the rumors were true. Neither confirmed nor anything. When people asked about his mysterious visitor, He would shrug and say that he served anyone who walked through his door. When they pressed for details, he would change the subject or refill their drinks. The mystery only made people more curious, and curiosity brought them back again and again. Within 3 months, the Rusted Anchor had become the most popular establishment on Rest. Miners came after their shifts to unwind and share stories. Traders stopped between runs to rest and resupply. Drifters passing through on their way to distant places found themselves staying longer than planned, drawn by the warmth of the bar and the quiet wisdom of its owner. Discovered that he was good at this. Not just the mechanics of bartending, which he had learned from guides and practice, but the heart of it, listening to people, making them feel welcome, offering words of comfort or advice when they needed it, and knowing when to simply stay quiet and let them talk. The calling stone sat on a shelf behind the bar, tucked between bottles where it caught the light and glowed softly. Looked at it sometimes, wondering if he would ever use it. He hoped he never had to. It seemed wrong somehow to call upon a king for help with everyday problems. The gift was too precious to waste on anything small. Returned 1 month after their first meeting, exactly as he had promised. He arrived late in the evening, after most of the other customers had gone home. Had been cleaning up, preparing to close, when the door opened, and that massive form ducked through once again. "You came back," said. "I told you I would." Took his usual seat, the stool creaking familiarly under his weight. "I have been looking forward to this all month. It is remarkable how much easier the burdens feel when you know there is rest waiting at the end of them." Poured the whiskey without being asked. "How are things in the Empire?" "Complicated," accepted the drink gratefully, "but perhaps slightly less hopeless than before. I have been thinking about what you said about giving my people something to build. I have proposed a new initiative, a project to create a memorial for the generation we lost. Not a monument of grief, but a living memorial. Gardens on a dozen worlds, tended by our surviving children, growing things that will outlast us all." "That sounds beautiful," said. "It has given some of my people a sense of purpose," said. "For the first time in years, they are talking about the future instead of dwelling only on the past. It is a small thing, but small things can grow into something greater." Smiled. "That's how most things start, small." They talked through the night again, and again the next month and the month after that. It became a ritual, a tradition, something that both of them looked forward to and protected fiercely. No matter what crises threatened the Empire or what challenges faced the Rusted Anchor, they made time for these meetings. They made time for each other. Years passed. The bar grew famous in ways had never anticipated. Travelers came from distant worlds specifically to visit the Rusted Anchor, drawn by stories of the retired mechanic who had befriended a dragon king. Some hoped to see themselves. Most were disappointed. The Dragon King valued his privacy and was not about to share details of their friendship with anyone who asked. But other visitors came too. Powerful beings, leaders and rulers and figures of importance, who had heard whispers of a place where they could set aside their titles and simply exist. A queen from a distant empire arrived one night, wearing simple clothes and asking to be called by a name that was not her own. A legendary general came seeking solace after a campaign that had cost him more than he wanted to admit. A religious leader from a species had never encountered sat at the bar and wept quietly for hours before finally finding the words to explain his pain. Served them all the same way, drinks and conversation and a willingness to listen without judgment. He never asked for anything in return. He never treated any of them as more or less important than the miners and traders who made up his regular customers. "You have created something remarkable here," told him one night, many years into their friendship. "This bar has become a sanctuary, a place where the powerful can remember that they are also mortal, a place where burdens can be set down, even if only for a little while." Looked around at the bar he had inherited from an aunt he barely knew. It looked the same as it had when he first arrived, more or less. The sign still flickered occasionally, though he had fixed it a dozen times. The stools still creaked under weight. The shelves were fuller now, stocked with bottles from worlds he had never visited, gifts from grateful visitors who wanted to share a piece of their homes. "I didn't plan any of this," said. "I just wanted a quiet place to retire." "The best things rarely come from planning," said. "They come from being open to what the universe offers and having the wisdom to recognize gifts when they arrive." Thought about the night they had first met. A tired king seeking escape. A lonely bartender wondering if anyone would ever walk through his door. Two strangers who had found something neither of them expected. "You were my first customer," said. "Did I ever tell you that?" "You did not," sounded genuinely surprised. "I was your first." Night of the big storm. "I'd been open for 4 days and nobody had come. I was thinking about closing early when you walked in." Shook his head, smiling at the memory. "Of all the people in the galaxy who could have been my first customer, it was a Dragon King. What are the odds of that?" "Astronomically low," admitted, "and yet here we are." "Here we are," agreed. The calling stone still sat on its shelf, still glowing softly, still unused. Had never needed it. He never wanted to need it. But knowing it was there, knowing that help was available if he ever truly required it, gave him a sense of security he had not felt in a very long time. More than that, knowing that would come back, month after month, year after year, gave him something else. Something he had not known he was missing until he found it. It gave him a friend. The rusted anchor remained at the edge of the settlement on its rest, weathered and worn and welcoming. Its sign still flickered. Its stools still creaked. And every night, without fail, its door opened to anyone who needed a place to rest, a drink to warm them, and someone willing to listen. That was the legacy Cole had built without meaning to. Not through grand plans or ambitious dreams, but through simple kindness offered freely to anyone who asked. And sometimes, when the moons aligned just right and the bar was quiet, a massive figure would duck through the doorway, would take his usual seat, would pour his usual drink, and two old friends would talk until dawn. The galaxy was vast and complicated and full of problems that seemed impossible to solve. But in the rusted anchor, none of that mattered. What mattered was the warmth of good whiskey, the comfort of honest conversation, and the knowledge that no matter how heavy your burdens, there was always a place where you could set them down. Cole, retired mechanic and accidental bartender, would not have had it any other way.